The time is now 6 p.m. Our regular City Council meeting for July 14, 2020 is now in session. First on the agenda is the opening prayer and the pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas, and I'll come down and give that. Father in heaven, we gather today while there is unrest in our country with the COVID-19 and a storm of protests within our nation. This baffles our minds, but we know you will enlighten our minds with trust. It brings tears to our eyes, but we know you will show us a vision of what is to come. It breaks our hearts, but we know you will inflame our hearts with love. We may not understand, but we know you will guide us through the path. Thank you for all the blessings coming our way, and thank you for preparing us and giving us the confidence to continue to do what's best for our community. In your name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. All right, I have a special announcement. Council and guests, while seated, it is perfectly fine to remove your mask and while speaking at the podium. But as you approach the dais and you depart the chamber, we respectfully ask you place your face covering back on. We'll continue with announcements of upcoming events. Mr. James?
Apologize, shows you how ill-prepared I am. Just a reminder for folks, the same announcement as last week, which is we have an election coming up in November. If you check the city's website, you can find out information about when candidates can file to run, what the deadlines are, and for which places. Thank you.
Thank you. Announcements and recognitions by our city manager, Dr. Brown.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
Okay. Announcements and recognitions by the mayor. I have none. So we'll move on to the hearing of residents. Ms. Dennis, do you have the sheet? Okay. Again, next on the agenda is the hearing of residents. This time is set aside for any person who wishes to address the city council. Each person is limited to 3 minutes, and we ask before addressing the council, for the record, please state your name and address. And we have 2 individuals that signed up. Richard A. Kuntz. Excuse me, the mic's not on. All right.
Is that better? My name is Richard A. Kuntz. I reside at 2960 Red Tip here in the city of Schertz. I come to you as a citizen of the city and also as president of the Schertz Police Association. I come to you to deliver our concerns regarding the city's studies on the staffing study and class income. Now, this delivery is not to point blame, embarrass anybody, or have a negative face to it. We simply have our concerns that we wish to express to the city council. In regards to this study, it's more focused on the police department, not just so much as the study as a whole, but how the study affects the police department and the members. Regarding the staffing study, there are some important points of this study that were made, specifically at the beginning. One of these that I think speaks most strongly is the fact that the city is unable to find and retain key employees. This is keenly felt in the police department. We currently have 7 positions since July of 2019 that we have been vacated by people who have left the department for one reason or another and have not been able to be filled. Out of a department of only 53 current sworn officers, not necessarily total number of positions, but only 53 are currently filled, that 7 is a huge impact on us and our abilities to provide services to the city and the citizens. One of the other points that we want to make regarding the staffing studies is their calculations. There are several reasons that we believe their calculations are not correct and are inaccurate. One of the most glaring is they pointed out that there were 31 patrol officers. There are actually only 24 actual patrol officers on duty. So those calculations, just by that alone, are not going to be accurate. In addition, they do averaging over an entire year period. Their study specifically pointed to the International City and County Managers Association and one of their studies that they did as a part of their method and methodology. In that study, they actually took 2 4-week periods and used those periods to study. Those periods were also the highest call volumes of the year, and they only used the actual officers and people on duty at that time to make those calculations. In addition, on the class and comp study, one of the biggest things that have been brought up and affects is the compression issue. And what I mean by compression, especially between ranks, is when you have an officer as a patrolman making more than a corporal, some making more than a sergeant, and now with this new pay scale, some who will be making more than lieutenants. This just does not speak fairly. This also demotivates people, and it's a very important issue for the members of the department, and I think also for the city. In addition, that study talked about standby pay and on-call pay. We in the police department, we do not get that. It talks about giving tuition assistance, $2,000 a year. Yes, we do get that, but that's a limited benefit. Once that money is exhausted for the entire city, even if you were eligible, you do not get that amount. That study talked about education incentive pay. In other words, those who have bachelor's and master's degrees. We do not get that. The fire department members do, the non-exempt firefighters, police officers do not. In addition, it's a the current status of the police department, we're highly limited in the certification pays that we get. The most any of us can really expect at any one pay period is about $53.08, just by the certifications that are available. Competition. I think everybody understands the city is in competition with other agencies and other entities for the employees, and especially for good officers. There's already a few number of officers that are even eligible, I think, by our standards to work here. That number becomes even smaller when the city is not being competitive in attracting good officers. And by competitive, it's not looking at what the market is. The market is the average. You as an employer, if you're looking for an employee, you don't look for the average candidate to hire. You look for the person that stands above. In today's situation, those candidates are doing the same for who they wish to work for. They're not looking for the average city or agency. They're looking for those that stand above. So if the city really wants to attract those individuals, then we need to be motivated and stand above everybody else. What happens if we don't become competitive? If the city's not competitive, we're going to lose out. We've already seen this happen in the fact that for over a year, we've been unable to fill those 7 open positions, and it's going to continue. As that continues, more people feel the burden, more people are going to burn out, more morale is going to decrease, and we may, well, I believe we will see more people leave. In conclusion, I know a lot of people believe the city does not have the funds to increase and be competitive in this this area. And I understand, and we all understand, it's not easy to make choices, because that's what it really comes down to, choices and priorities. You know, you only have so much money. You can choose to spend it on this, or you can choose to spend it on that. One's going to suffer. We all feel that in our own personal lives. It's a matter of priority. Where does the city have the priority? Where is your priority for your safety, your family, and the community and the citizens? And then you need to ask yourself, does the community and the citizens still have the same priority as you do? I thank you for your time. Please have a good evening.
Thank you. Next is Maggie Tinnington.
Good evening, Council. I just wanted to give you a heads up that we are having a Civic Leaders Luncheon September 15th. This is to, I hate to say take the place of the Meet the Candidates, but it's kind of like a Meet the Candidates, but a little bit on steroids. So what we're going to do is we invite those that are running for office, those that are incumbents, even those that are not running at all, to have a table at our luncheon, not to eat, but to stand, to talk, to meet, whether it's citizens who are also welcome to register to attend this luncheon, but a lot of our chamber business members that are voters that live in the area that would really like to be able to face-to-face ask you questions. Those that are in place right now, those that are running for re-election, you know, what your thoughts are and things. So that will be September 15th, and Shelby, our special events coordinator, will be reaching out to each cities, their councils, their mayors, and inviting them to take part in this. And there is no charge for that table, for that promotion. We're opening it to all that are running until the tables run out, so that could also be county as well, and the school board. And the only other thing that I have is I want to thank Dean Midlick. He is the Marketing and PR Director for Physicians Premier. I realize on the agenda number 5, the workshop, the discussion that's going to be happening with Dr. Carter and Dr. Schwarlick. Dean has been a longtime member of our chamber, different businesses. He's always found his way back to us, and he watches the city council meetings for the cities, and especially Schertz. And so with the updates that are happening with the COVID and the information that's out there, the 2 physicians that are coming out tonight and here to give this presentation, just really appreciate them taking the time to do this, because it's probably all in most of our minds about with our businesses, with our cities and our community. And so just wanted to take a moment and thank them for doing that. And thank you, Dean, too. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Ms. Dennis, is there any hearing of residents submitted by email? Thank you. We'll move on to consent agenda items. Consent agenda items are considered self-explanatory, and information packets are provided to council and are available for public viewing. These items require no discussion unless requested by council. Item number 1, minutes. Consideration and or action regarding the approval of the minutes of our regular meeting on July 7th, 2020. Item number 2, resolution number 20R70. Consideration or action approving a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a public library interlocal agreement between the City of Schertz and the County of Bexar for the purpose of participating in a CARES Act 2020 grant agreement to circulate Wi-Fi hotspots and other matters in connection therewith. And item number 3, resolution number 20R76. Consideration or action approving a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the city manager to waive the utility billing reimbursement requirements for the Buffalo Valley Youth Association, that's BVYA, and the Schertz Youth Soccer Alliance, that's SYSA, for the 2020 calendar year, totaling approximately $20,000. Council, is there any of these consent items that need to be removed for separate action? If not, is there a motion to approve consent agenda items 1, 2, and 3?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Dalla and second by Councilmember Brown. Council, any other comments? Not, let's call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, we have 7 ayes, no objection, motion passes. Move on to discussion items. Resolution, item number 4, resolution number 20R67. A resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, calling for an election to be held on November 3rd, 2020, for the purpose of electing council members for Place 3, Place 4, Place 5, for a 3-year term and making provisions for the conduct of the elections, authorizing contracts with the county clerk of Comal County and the elections administrator for Bexar and Guadalupe counties to conduct this election, authorizing the elections to be held as a joint election, resolving other matters, incidents, and related matters. Ms. Dennis, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you read, Mayor, the resolution before you calls the November 3rd, 2020 Schertz joint general election with Bexar County, Comal County, Guadalupe County for the purpose of electing council members in places 3, 4, and 5 for a 3-year term to begin November 2020 and ending November 2023, and for the approval of the Comal County Elections Agreement Memorandum of Understanding, the Bexar County Election Memorandum of Understanding, and the Guadalupe County contract. Action on this item will authorize staff to finalize the agreements with the 3 counties and the respective election administrators or county clerk to conduct our election, as well as to finalize a joint election agreements with other entities. I have posted a notice of filing for application for place on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot on the website, bulletin board, and it's in the Schertz magazine. The first day to file for place on the ballot is Saturday, July 18th, but since the city offices are closed, the date moves to Monday, the 20th, July 20th, and the last day to file for place on the ballot is Monday, August the 17th by 5 p.m. Candidate packets are online, and it is encouraged that those interested view the information. The packet can also be obtained in the city secretary's office, and the address is 1400 Schertz Parkway, building number 2. The counties will be meeting with their commissioners' court to finalize the early voting election day locations. Once these are approved, I will be providing an information item to update the council and to those that are interested in running. Once again, the counties will be utilizing election day vote centers, which means registered voters of their county can vote at any election day vote centers which will be listed. There will be a lot there may be a lot of changes forthcoming, because at this time, I know if the governor is going to extend early voting, if so, that will make a big difference in the locations because of a possible 3-week early voting schedule. We are awaiting final decision. Our office will keep all those involved updated as we hear back. We will be posting on our website all the early voting election day vote centers once finalized. Approval has been determined. Council will also be updated. Staff recommends approval of resolution number 20R67, and I am available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. Council, floor is open for discussion. Questions? Councilmember Scagliola?
Yeah, Brenda, thank you so much. I know it's a big effort coordinating with 3 different counties out there, and you do a superb job. Thank you so very much, and you do a really good job of keeping us posted on upcoming changes and whatnot. Mayor, if you please, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 20R67.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion's been made by Councilmember Scagliola, second by Councilmember Brown. Council, any other comments? If not, let's call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
We have 7 ayes, no objection, motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Dennis.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
We'll move on to a workshop. Discussion and possible actions regarding the ordinance number 20H18, an update regarding the COVID-19 virus, and our current ordinance number 20H18, our declaration of local disaster. Mr. Kell, floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Charles Kelm, Assistant City Manager, stepping in, pinch hitting for the chief. I wanted to start out by saying thanks for allowing him to take some time off with his family. This is his first break since February, so I really appreciate y'all giving him the time and bearing with me tonight. You might want to say a prayer for the Long family. Their son is in their second night of basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. So many of us remember the first night. It's the second night that's the worst. So. Okay, so our current numbers for the Guadalupe County we've kind of reformatted the slides a little bit, that we have 756 active cases in Guadalupe. Yesterday, there were 7 new cases added within the city of Schertz. In Bexar County, we have 12,327 that are active, and then Comal County, 843 that are active cases. In Dishas Region 8, we've seen 2,618 number of cases increase over the past week. You've seen this chart before, and this just really is showing that the trend is continuing. In the Houston area, in the Dallas Metroplex, their rate of growth is much greater than what we're seeing in our counties and even in Bexar, but their rate is increasing. This is the state data for hospitalizations of positive COVID cases. So we started tracking this in May, and you see the gradual incline, or increase, I should say. The current is there's 10,410 positive cases that are hospitalized in the state. The positivity rate continues to increase over July 7th, which was 13.5% we reported last time, to 16.8%, so that's about a 3% growth in the positivity rate. And then in the daily positive rate, the actual numbers from July 7th, we had about a little over 300 cases increase within the state. Again, this is hospitalizations. So within Bexar County, drilling down a little bit further, we started showing this number. We have an increase from July 7th as well, about 32 patients in increase. A larger number in ICUs and those on ventilators. But the new update that we have, as we compare the numbers and drill down into the statistics, we have 2,600 that are non-COVID hospitalizations. So what that really means is that within the Bexar County metro area, we have 4,000 beds available in the hospital, with about 400 open and available as of today. That means 3,600 of them are filled with different patients. Changing gears a little bit, the senior center opening date is still to be determined. We're watching that for phase 4 when our rate of growth decreases. But we are still providing senior lunch Monday through Friday, 11:30 to 12:30, and we're feeding about 70 people a day. So. And before I take any questions, as Maggie did share, we have a couple of physicians from Physician Premier ER, and thanks to Dean for bringing them. But Dr. Stephen Carter and Dr. Lonnie Schwerlich have a short presentation, and then we'll take questions at the end if that's okay with council.
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah. Carter.
First, doctors, I'd like to welcome you to our city council. Thank you for taking the opportunity to provide us some information.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here and inviting us, actually. It's our pleasure. I'm just going to go through a couple of things that haven't been discussed from the previous gentleman, Mr. Kellum, and I'll go through very briefly.
If you want, you can take your mask off while you're presenting, and then just the down arrow.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, as Mr. Kellum, as he reviewed, according to the data that I've seen as of July 7th, there was about 1,005 COVID cases in Guadalupe County, 337 recovered, and 87 confirmed active cases, 14 deaths as well, recorded by Guadalupe Regional Medical Center. One of the things that's interesting, I had a conversation with the Northeast Methodist, who's the largest health system hospital to us, and he was sharing some data, which is that there's been about a 55% increase in hospitalizations over the last week, 30% utilization of the Bexar County ICU hospital beds for COVID. And he gave me an age breakdown of patients being admitted for COVID, and the largest percentage is still about 70, 79-year-olds, but also there's about 19.5% that are in 40 to 49-year-olds, and we're starting to see more and more younger patients who are being affected by the disease and also severely. One of the things that affects us as far as emergency physicians is that we initially saw a tremendous decrease in the number of patients who were coming into the emergency room for chronic conditions, and particularly in the areas of acute MIs, strokes, diabetic emergencies. And this is very concerning to us, and a lot of that, we believe, has to do with there's a lot of phobia as it relates to many patients fearing that they would either contract the virus in the emergency department and or the hospital. And now, within the last week or so, we're starting to see some of those patients come back, but we saw a tremendous drop. We saw about a 42% overall drop in ER visits, 23% in acute heart attacks, and 20% decreases for stroke as well. This is just a picture of what the virus looks like. And it uses those structures on the outer portion of the membrane to actually enter the cells. One comparison, because I know, and we're going to be facing this in the fall, but if you look at the difference between flu and COVID, flu has a RO number, which is essentially how many people can be infected by one person, about 1.3. For COVID, it's about 2.5. And the incubation time, which is the time from exposure until you develop symptoms for flu, is about 1 to 4 days, and then for COVID, it's about 1 to 14. But the significant difference is hospitalization rate. For flu is about 2%, and for COVID, we're seeing more along the lines of 19%. Also, in terms of the case fatality rate, for flu is about 0.1 or less. For COVID, we're seeing about 1 to 3.4%, so more than double the rate of flu fatalities. Of course, the pandemic started in Wuhan, as far as we know, back in December, and now it's worldwide. Primary mode of transmission is airborne, as we know, but the secondary fomites, which are the things that people touch, the surfaces that the spores actually land on, are very important as well. Of course, the things that you want to emphasize in terms of the city is the same things as the CDC is recommending, which is the transmission precautions, which are essentially washing hands, personal hygiene, avoiding contact, close contact, and a 6 foot social distancing, as well as continue to wear masks, of course. Some of the signs that, in terms of patients that would be calling EMS versus getting into their car, hopefully, are if they're having trouble breathing, persistent chest pain, confusion, or cyanosis. Those are things at which you wouldn't want the individual to get into their car. They would much be better served to call EMS. General symptoms, the only thing, most people are aware of most of these symptoms, but one of the things that we've been seeing more recently is that patients who have a new loss of taste or smell, that's one of the primary symptoms of COVID. And that's something that we've been seeing probably over the last month or two. Most of the patients primarily are that get the disease, most of them will recover. There's really about 5% of the patients who actually go on to require ICU care or more advanced care. This is just a demonstration of what the size of the virus is and why it's important to wear a mask. The virus itself is about 0.1 microns. If you compare that to a red blood cell, which is about 7 microns, you can see why it's so small, and that's why it's very important that people wear protective coverings to protect themselves. We see a lot of patients who are wearing homemade masks. It's important for them to know that if they're wearing a homemade mask, it should have at least 2 layers of high quality, preferably cotton, with a thread count of at least 180 or more. So some of the positive things that have been coming out in terms of treatment. So as of the last few weeks, actually there's the hospital populations for the patients who are actually intubated. We're starting to use a combination of things, but one of them is a drug you probably heard about called remdesivir. And that's an antiviral that was originally used for HIV patients. Also, we're using dexamethasone, which is a steroid for patients who are intubated. And prone positioning, which is something that we've learned, it enables us to remove fluid from the lung. We're finding that to be extremely helpful. Also, taking the plasma from patients who have actually been infected with the virus, we're actually finding that that may be helpful as well. ECMO, which is something that's very limited. It's primarily here in San Antonio at Methodist Hospital, but that's where essentially the blood is taken from a patient and oxygenated, and that's being shown to be very helpful as well. And also what we've learned is that patients who go on to require higher amounts of oxygen, we're actually learning that intubation can be extremely harmful to the patient, so we're using alternatives to that as right now. One thing about vaccines, currently there are about 21 vaccines in trials, and the hope is that by January of next year that we're going to have an actual vaccine that will be utilized for the general population, but they're actively working on that. I'm going to let my colleague, Dr. Schertz, talk a little bit about some of the things that we're using in the emergency department right now.
Yes, so the most important thing with this disease is not to get it from the very first, and that, of course, is avoiding contact with other people, trying to stay away from it. One of the things that we have seen with this virus that has surprised us is we thought as the temperature got hot and warmer that we would see a decrease and it would sort of flutter away until the cold weather. But I think what we're seeing with that is this South Texas people, when it gets hot, just like a lot of places, we go inside into air-conditioned buildings, getting closer together, more compacted, and that may be what's causing it. So the things that you can do to try and protect yourself in this is to, number one, try, obviously, to avoid these contact with people. Going up elevators, instead of going with an elevator, maybe use the stairs so that you go up there. Go out once or twice a day. And this is just a personal thing that I think that we have seen is, number one, is one of the things, this virus, it doesn't like heat and it doesn't like humidity. So your body's natural defense mechanism towards infections is something we've always seen, and you've always seen in the movies, is it increases your temperature. It obviously is doing that for a reason. We developed that defense mechanism for a reason. Taking aspirin, Tylenol, Motrin, that kind of stuff does decrease it, makes you feel better, but in reality that's one of your defense mechanisms. So one of the things that I've been telling people is try and put two things together. If this virus takes 2 to 14 days to get into your body and sits there and smolders until it pops out, and it's sensitive to heat, if you do a daily workout, which increases your activity, increases your temperature, increases your resistance, so a good hard workout once a day, maybe in the heat, to overheat yourself, might kill off that little rascal before he's able to come back out. Then the other things is vitamin C. Vitamin C helps you fight these infections. So we're recommending 1,000 milligrams 2 to 3 times a day. And taking that, there's a whole bunch of different forms of it. Any one of those is okay. Drinking citrus is good for that. Don't drink too much of, like, the grapefruit juices, because what we've seen with people drinking a whole lot of citrus is if you do that for 2 or 3 weeks, high amounts, you end up with kidney stones, these oxalate kidney stones. So the typical vitamin C pills may be better than eating the citrus or a whole lot of the citrus. The other thing is zinc. Zinc, for this virus as well as a lot of them, works to stop, it does multiple different things. Is zinc, number one, has to get inside the cell, but once it gets inside the cell, it blocks the RNA transcriptase. And it's an RNA virus, so it goes up to the cell, attaches to this ACE receptor site, which is like a little kind of a port, and then the cell itself grabs hold of it and pulls it inside. There inside, it then uses your body's RNA transcriptase, which is an enzyme, to reproduce it. Zinc blocks that RNA transcriptase to keep it from reproducing that virus, so it helps you fight that virus. Then the other thing that zinc does is zinc, once it's inside the cell, it blocks the iron molecule, and that's the way this virus causes a lot of its inflammatory response that gives you this horrendous disease. So this zinc, which is positively charged, just like the iron, which is positively charged, the zinc goes and attaches over that iron molecule and keeps the virus from knocking it loose. And that's how this particular virus causes a lot of its inflammatory process. And one of the things we're learning from this virus that may help us downstream is that always every year during the wintertime, we see, right after the colds and flus hit, we see a big bump in coronary disease, like heart attacks and strokes. What we're seeing with this virus, and this may give us a clue to what we can do to decrease heart disease in the future, is this is an accentuated effect of the typical old cold virus. Instead of knocking a few iron molecules loose like the typical, this guy goes just rabid and knocks them all loose and does a much more accentuated. So it's showing us what maybe the typical virus is doing, typical cold is doing, and maybe that's what's causing our bump in coronary disease, and maybe we'll learn enough from this to learn how to stop that, possibly with zinc. The Pulmicort inhalers work. Sinclair and Pulmicort inhalers, those are, Pulmicort is a inhaled steroids, and they found that helps block this inflammatory process, because once this virus starts knocking those iron molecules loose, it causes this inflammatory response. The Pulmicort inhaler helps block that inflammatory response, and that you can get from your family doctor. Sinclair is a medication that asthmatics take, and what it does is it blocks that inflammatory cascade that happens when that iron is knocked loose. There's a big bunch of turmoil going on and controversy about hydroxychloroquine, whether it works, whether it doesn't work. If you look at all the studies that have been done, or most of them, it was done with hydroxychloroquine by itself. Hydroxychloroquine's mechanism of action that is mapped out is that it does multiple different things. It is an old malaria drug, but it also is a good anti-inflammatory use for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. But its effect on the cells is that it alkalinizes, that hydroxy is an alkaline molecule. So it alkalinizes your cell, and it also blocks that receptor site somewhat to make it hard for that virus to get in. So that's what it does by itself. It blocks the site, the ACE receptor site, then it also alkalinizes the inside of the cell, which makes it more hostile for the virus. In addition to that, it is called an ionophore. Pepsid is another ionophore. And the other interesting thing is that the chemical in apples and some fruits and vegetables called quercetin is also an ionophore. And what an ionophore does is it opens a pore into the cell to allow the zinc to get in, because it's hard for zinc to get inside the cell naturally at higher concentrations because it's a positively charged ion, and this lipid like wall around it, it's hard for that positively charged to get in there to help block the RNA transcriptase and to block that iron molecule from getting knocked loose. So hydroxychloroquine, one of its functions is to help zinc get inside the cell. Pepsid also helps zinc get inside the cell. And then the quercetin does. Now, the interesting thing about that I found out when I was reading is, when you were being raised, you always were told, apple a day keeps the doctor away, and you always wondered, there's a wives' tale. One of the things that I've found going through life is, a lot of these old wives' tales actually turned out to be some truth to them. And so turns out that apple a day may have been the quercetin in there, allowing zinc to get inside the cell to help block the cold virus from getting inside your body because of the zinc being more prominent in the cell. So eating a lot of apples will help. You can get quercetin over the counter. Taking zinc helps. So if you want to do stuff that's just over the counter, quercetin or eating apples plus vitamin C plus zinc will help protect yourself, plus exercising, maybe getting good workout where you overheat yourself once a day just to try and cook that booger out of you before it finally rises up and gets to the point where you get fluid disease. And then just trying to stay as healthy as possible, getting a lot of rest. The only thing that I'd warn about Pepsi, see, hydroxychloroquine, there's this big turmoil about it causing these arrhythmias. The arrhythmias caused by this type of drug is associated with chloroquine and quinine. It's actually it's kind of parent molecule is quinine, the old quinine, and then chloroquine was the next version of it. Those two causes arrhythmias and stuff. Hydroxychloroquine doesn't cause hardly any arrhythmia. That prolonged QT that you hear about that causes the arrhythmias, it really doesn't do that. But the kicker on the studies with hydroxychloroquine, if you look at them, all of them weren't done with zinc. So they only got 50% of the mechanism of action being used in those studies. So one of the things that I'm trying to get organized in Corpus and at all our sites is to initiate a study where we, on select people with a regular protocol, do hydroxychloroquine plus zinc, and then see if, giving it to asymptomatic people that are positive, whether it keeps them from becoming symptomatic, then also see if it keeps symptomatic from needing to get admitted, trying to save those hospital beds to be able to help us survive this better. And then what other part of this study I want to do is downstream watch these same patients that we gave this to, that we're thinking we're blocking this inflammatory reaction on, and see if, what's the incidence of coronary artery disease, strokes downstream that we're seeing in these patients, and see if it decreases that, and then possibly using that to help us with the common cold and maybe decrease heart attacks and strokes in the future. So this is a horrible disease. It's very infectious. It is no ifs, ands, or buts real. Wearing the mask is definitely good. If you have to go inside around other people, keep your distance from them. And places that are really constricted, like elevators, I would avoid. Get that little workout as you go up the stairs instead. So let's all try and stay safe and healthy, and we're doing our best over there. We're testing like crazy. We're getting criticized for testing, but we're going to get criticized for anything. We're trying to help, and it's just hard to get tested. We'll, sometimes we're overloaded, and, just be patient with us. We're trying our best.
Thank you, doctors. Council, floor is open for discussion. Councilmember Scott.
Yeah, this is the most helpful thing I have ever read, seen, or heard, and I'm an avid reader, and congratulations. Y'all did a fantastic job. I have several questions. I'm going to start from the back, from the most recent one, and I'm going to, if you don't mind, in that order. How much zinc would you recommend for the vitamin C? You recommended 1,000 milligrams 2 to 3 times a day. Zinc, what's your recommendation?
50 milligrams once a day.
Okay.
Now understand, zinc makes you nauseated if you take it on an empty stomach. So always take it with food. And what I do when I take my zinc is I break it into like 3 pieces. One with the morning meal, dinner, lunch and dinner. That way you don't get so nauseated, sorry. Yeah, so taking it split up during the day helps your tummy. You'll notice that the first time you try and take a whole pill at one time.
Okay.
That's fantastic. And I really appreciate you breaking down the hydrochloroquine just on a scientific and molecular level, and kind of not, getting away from the politics and just the sheer how does it work and why and all of that. This was just awesome. My question is, if there are, I don't know if it was on your study or the previous one, there's 4,000 area hospitals and 400 are open. I think that was, so there's about 10% capacity left remaining. One thing that I read almost every day is there's so-and-so amount of staffed beds. Do y'all know what that means, the staffed beds? Is that different from just availability, or what?
So part of the issue, part of the problem is we may have beds, but we may not have enough staff to, some of the hospitals don't have enough staff to actually monitor those patients. And so a couple of things that the hospitals are doing is that they're creating COVID units to try to increase, for the increased capacity for the number of COVID patients. They're actually taking units that were previously med-surg or other reasons and actually turning them into COVID units, and part of that is to isolate those patients so that it's much safer for anyone else that's coming into the hospital. But one of the issues has been the number of staffs that have been available to actually care for the patients as the number increases. That's an issue.
And I'm kind of apprehensive about some of the statistics that are floating around. Like I read an article today how Florida, 22% of their testing sites showed 100% of everybody who went in tested positive. And the reporter from Fox called them and they're like, no, that's not right, it's 10%. So you have to be really careful when you're dealing with statistics. My other question was, I think that was on the side that you were doing, you were showing that in the regular flu, and I'm just trying to do this part from memory, like 1 to 2% go to the hospital, but for COVID, 20% do. And I couldn't help but put a connection together. If emergency room visits are down 42% from last year because people are so freaked out because every day it's doom and gloom and oh my God, you're going to die or whatever. I mean, it's pretty scary when you read the news. So they're terrified to even go to the hospital to get treatment. By the same token, is it possible that the emergency room visits are up? Like if I have it, oh my God, I'm dying, I better go get checked out. Could that be inflating it on the other hand? I hesitate to even ask that, but I think it's a legitimate question.
Well, we're seeing a tremendous number of patients that are coming into us because they've been exposed to someone who either has been positive at work or positive in their family. I mean, tremendous numbers. So we've seen a huge surge in patients over the last 2 to 4 weeks. And we've been seeing we're in about 100 or more patients a day, primarily just for testing. So there is a phobia going on right now, and or positive exposures are increasing within families and or within work environments. And so we're seeing a lot of those patients coming into the ER for positive rapid testing to find out if they're positive or not.
That is excellent intelligence. Thank you for answering that. So they're considered a hospitalization if they come to the emergency room for the test? Yes or no? I don't know.
Well, no, but what is happening as far as the numbers is if a patient goes in for an ambulatory procedure, they're tested before the procedure, and so they are included. And also, many of the mortalities that are happening, if they had COVID, even if they die from a heart attack, they're counted as well. And so that's skewing the numbers for sure.
Thank you for pointing that out, by the way, because thank you for saying it. It needed to be said, and thank you for your intellectual honesty and your academic rigor. Thank you. And then finally, last but not least, if there are currently 10,410 people in hospitals across the state, I assume with the COVID, I think that was on Mr. Klein's presentation. One thing I can't, it wasn't least, I have one more after that. One thing I can't find, how many were there last year at this time? So you can compare apples to apples. I don't know. You don't know? And then, okay, this is last, finally. I'm having a lot of difficulty as the days progress and go on finding data for the deaths, the daily deaths. I've read that this is the 12th week that they're down, but as time goes on, it's harder and harder to find those statistics, but there's an abundance of news on the COVID being super high and growing so aggressively, et cetera. And so in Texas, are the deaths going down? Are you gentlemen aware?
From what I've seen, there's been a decrease in the deaths, but the data is really delayed. And so we have a lot of patients, when they're tested, there's a lag between them being tested positive and whether or not they're hospitalized or they actually die from the disease. There's a lag in reporting, and so there's really perhaps some inaccuracy out there, and there just needs to be better reporting.
Okay, thank you. And again, did you want to go?
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing in Corpus and other areas is in our testing that they are only recording our positives. So if you see this reporting on the news that there is a higher percentage of people in Texas with COVID, it's not that, it's just that they have made a mistake recently and stopped recording the the negatives. So obviously your percentage positives are going to go up because they're only doing it. So they just now realized that in several different questions when they present them to us, we realized what they were doing. And so now there's this big rush going back to try and figure out how many people did we actually test and what was the actual positive number or percentage in the state of Texas. So we're not 30% like they're saying. It's more probably like you would expect, maybe 10%. But they just weren't recording the negatives. So, yeah, I've had some interesting questions, too, from the health department yesterday where they called me and they said, okay, we're trying to get this total number, and so can you tell us how many you're testing? And I went, so if you're doing what we told you to do 2 weeks ago of recording the negatives as well as the positive, add those two together and you'll get it. And she still asked me, okay, this is Corpus, this isn't here, so I'm hoping it's better here, but it was really disappointing to find out that she couldn't understand just to add them together, and then, or maybe she still was not recording the negatives, and so didn't have that data. So it's kind of heartbreaker, but we're all learning, and this whole process is novel, and I think what we need to do is try and come out of this with more information that'll help us in the future, like with heart attacks and stuff like that.
That's fantastic. And finally, you did make a believer out of me on the masks, because I've read a lot of information from articles from the WHO saying, oh no, the mask, but you made a believer of me, and I'm a teacher, and I'm going back to school in 3 or 4 weeks, so I really appreciate that information. Thank you.
Councilmember
I want to
Hayward.
make a final point, and that is that regarding the masks, you see, there's the surgical masks, which are helpful. It blocks out about 80% of the particles. In the healthcare field, we use, of course, N95, which is 95% of the particles. But the more important thing is that someone who has the disease, you're blocking them from spreading it, the aerosols. And what we're finding is that there may be particles that are actually traveling in the air across the room and not just the 6 feet. And so it's very important to continue to wear masks.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Hayward?
I was looking, thank you for your report, it's amazing. When you say singular, for someone that will probably be taking it daily, how does that affect them or keep them from possibly getting COVID, or just the severity of it if they got COVID?
Right, it wouldn't protect you from getting it, but it'll help protect you from that inflammatory response. It blocks that inflammatory cascade, so that iron molecule bounces down through the vessels, inflaming the cells, and it incites this inflammatory response of these different chemicals bouncing and causing the whole flame. It blocks, it's one of the blockers of that cascade, and that's how it works for asthma. Asthma is like a chronic inflammatory process of the lung. It works for that, but it also works for this. And you wonder is, how much is asthma associated with maybe the same kind of thing, and people may be more sensitive to this inflammatory process? So I think we're going to learn a lot.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dalla?
Just want to say thank you guys for coming out and speaking to us and sharing your information and y'all's perspective and experiences, and certainly appreciate the fact that you guys also endorse wearing masks. I think that's going to be a key component going forward as we continue to deal with this. And again, thank you.
Councilmember Brown?
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, just a real quick dialogue on the number of beds that are available. I've been around hospitals the last couple of years, unfortunately, and they don't stay at 90% capacity. They like to stay at 98% capacity because they're there to make money and to serve people. So it seems to me that, 400 beds, people are making it sound like we don't have enough, but really, that's a more than normal capacity availability. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, what they've done is they've drastically increased the number of beds that are being occupied. So what you're seeing is, anytime you have a huge number out there being seen compared to normal, the ones being sent home is 400, but that's still only 10% of the beds that are unoccupied, and they're quickly being filled up. And just as an example of what to expect in the near future, it's scary because like at our site, we'll see about 100 a day, and about 20 to 25 of those are positive. And there's probably, of the other 75, there's probably a few of those that are false negatives, so you probably are getting around 30 of those as positive. Of those 30, 15% will end up in the hospital around 10 to 14 days from now. Those that go into the hospital stay there for about 14 days. So what you will see is, as this goes on, it's just going to be continuously piling up. And so what we've done in Texas, we've called for the FEMA group. We have a bunch of star nurses, is what they're called, FEMA star nurses. They come down from all over the United States to help out. The hospitals are using those to occupy and man a lot of the beds that are left unoccupied most of the year, just because of volume and trying to fine-tune that profitability. But they're not doing it now because they're trying to be ready for this. That's what you're seeing. Yeah, it's a little bit more than they try to fine-tune it normally, but in a fine-tuning, when you're using elective surgeries, you can do that. When you're dealing with this huge number of patients and it getting more and more crowded, you really don't want to do that. And so the hospitals are being smart, trying to help us deal with this.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation.
Yeah, I just want to say, pass along our gratitude for the presentation. Very informative. I love the treatment here. Self-treatment. Hey, start working on it. Don't get sick. Wear your mask.
Keeps the doctor away.
That's it. We're going to have a run on apples and a lot of people running on the parkway.
Yes.
Right? Thank you all. Thanks for providing the information. I also just want to point out that Chief Long has expressed that our public affairs is updating our website with the numbers within the hour after we've been notified. So the numbers are current. It's posted on our website. There is no action that's being taken on this one, so we'll go ahead and do the roll call confirmation. Our City Secretary, Brenda Dennis, will provide roll call confirmation for consent agenda items number 1, number 2, and number 3, and discussion item number 4. Ms. Dennis?
Yes, Mayor. Consent agenda items 1 through 3. Motion was made by Councilmember Dallas, seconded by Councilmember Brown. Mayor Pro Tem Davis, Councilmember Scott, Larson, Dallas, Gagliola, Hayward, Brown voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 4, resolution number 20R67. A motion was made by Councilmember Scagliola, seconded by Councilmember Brown. Mayor Pro Tem Davis, Councilmember Scott, Larson, Dalla, Scagliola, Hayward, and Brown voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. Next is item number 6. It is a closed session. Our City Council will meet in the closed session under Section 551.071 and 551.072 of the Texas Governmental Code to seek the advice of its attorney on a matter of which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas, which clearly conflicts with this act, and to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, to wit, certain water, wastewater rights, and associated real property rights and available options. Due to the social distancing, the social distancing rules, this is a closed session. We ask that everyone that is not participating in this closed session, that you please step outside the building so we can go ahead and deliberate. Once we complete our deliberation, announcement will be made so you may return before we reconvene our regular meeting. The time is now 6:50. Okay, the time is now 7:18. We reconvene into a regular session after our discussion and deliberation in closed session in reference to the agenda item number 6 in regards to deliberation of the purchase, exchange, lease of value of real property to with certain water, wastewater rights and associated real property rights and available option. There is no action required, so therefore there is no roll call confirmation that is needed. So we'll move on to agenda item number 7. Number 7 is actually just, 2019 tax year reimbursements per the development agreement with Amazon.com Services Incorporated. This is an information packet available to council, and it's also available for the public to view. So we'll move on to requests and announcements. Our city manager, Dr. Brown, any further announcements?
I have no further announcements, Mayor.
Okay. Before we go into the other one, I want to bring up to council a change that we're going to make to the agenda going forward. What we're going to do is have council provide them an opportunity to ask for packets, updates, or information on anything you like, while also providing you the option to put something on the future agenda. So there's two options. It's information packets or updates, or if you really do want to put something on the agenda. So I want to make that available to you all, so we can go ahead and provide that information to you. Okay, so going forward on the next one, if there's an update, let us know. If you want it on the agenda, that will also still be available. All right? So with that, let's go ahead and say, Council, is there any possible items you'd like to place on future agenda items? None? Okay. Announcements and events attended by council members. Mayor Pro Tem Davis?
Yes, sir. Had a TERS meeting this afternoon and had a Housing Authority meeting last night. No issues.
All right. Councilmember Scott?
Not at this time.
Councilmember Larson?
Nothing there.
Councilmember Dalla?
Also had the TERS meeting today. It was a good discussion on what's going on with the Crossvine development.
Councilmember Scagliola?
Nada.
Councilmember Hayward?
Yes, I went to Commissioner's Court today, and while there, they talked about needing volunteers for a food distribution that they're having on Thursday, July 16th. They need volunteers from 12 to 5, and if you go to their Facebook page, Guadalupe County, Texas Emergency Management and Fire Marshal, you can find out about volunteering, and if you need any items, food items, you can go and do a pre-registration on their website, on their site, and there's a link on their Facebook page. The second thing I attended was the Guadalupe County Community Coalition, and the meeting we discussed was the discuss psychosis, and there is an organization called the Bluebonnet Trails Community Service Clear Path, and they help with treatment for people between the ages of 15 and 30 with psychosis and drug addiction, and there is no fee unless you have insurance that they can bill, but typically they do not, and they deal with just people from 15 through 30, and they're finding out that a lot of times some people end up having psychosis when they first do their first drug, alcohol, or something like that, and so they're doing treatment. And lastly, I want to remind folks that if they need school supplies for their kids, they can go to the raycap.org and sign up to get school supplies. So you have to fill out an application, but it's RayCap here in Schertz that will do school supplies. That is all, sir.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Brown?
Nothing tonight.
Okay, I don't have anything further to say. The time is 7:23. We stand adjourned.